Alright, here goes. I don't know why I'm even writing this. Maybe I just need to get it out. Maybe I want someone to tell me I did the right thing. Maybe I just want to feel less alone in this mess. My wife, Jeanette, and I had been married for 3 years. We weren't perfect, but we were happy, or at least I thought we were. We had our inside jokes, our favorite takeout spot, and our weekend rituals. I never thought I'd be one of those guys posting about betrayal. But here we are. It all started with a ski trip. A group of us, me, Jeanette, her best friend Tatiana, and Tatiana's husband, Steve, had planned a weekend getaway in the mountains. Another couple was supposed to join us later, but they were running late. The plan was simple: good food, good slopes, and some time away from work stress. I was pumped. The first day was great. We skied, had a few drinks by the fireplace, laughed until our stomachs hurt. It felt like one of those picture-perfect moments you see in movies. But life isn't a movie. The second day, everything changed. We had just come back from a supply run, stocking up on snacks and beer when it happened. Tatiana and I were unloading the car, joking about Steve's terrible skiing skills, when we heard it. A deep, rumbling sound that made the ground feel like it was vibrating. We turned toward the mountains, and that's when we saw it. An avalanche. A massive wall of snow was thundering down toward us. There was no time to think. Tatiana screamed. I grabbed her arm and yanked her into the car. The doors slammed shut, and then boom, the snow hit. The force knocked the car sideways. Everything went white. Felt like we were in a washing machine, rolling, spinning. Then it stopped. Silence. Just the sound of our breathing, ragged and uneven. We were buried. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I reached for my phone. No service. Of course. Are we stuck? Tatiana whispered. I tried the door. It wouldn't budge. For now, I muttered. The fear didn't hit me until I saw the look on her face. Panic. I swallowed down my own and focused. There had to be a way out. But while I was trying to figure out how to dig us free, I had no idea that outside, above the snow, my life was already falling apart. I don't know how long Tatiana and I were stuck in that car. Could have been an hour. Could have been 5. Time moves weird when you're buried under a mountain of snow. At first, we tried to stay calm. I used my jacket to block the vents so we wouldn't suffocate. We tried the emergency lights, but the car battery must have been damaged. My phone was useless, no service. Hers was dead. We just have to wait, I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. Steve and Jeanette will notice we're missing. Tatiana nodded, but she looked uneasy. And I get it. She had Steve up there and I had Jeanette. They'd be worried. They'd be looking for us. Right? Right? We sat in silence. The only sound our breathing and the occasional creak of the car shifting under the weight of the snow. The cold started to seep in. I was trying to keep my fingers moving, keep the blood flowing, when suddenly, Tatiana let out a breathless laugh. This is insane, she murmured, shaking her head. What? I was just thinking. This would be the craziest way to die. I huffed. Yeah, well, I'm not planning on dying today. But that creeping thought, that what if, was there. What if we didn't make it? What if this was it? I didn't want to go out like this. I didn't want her to go out like this. I thought about Jeanette. I pictured her face when she realized I was missing. She'd be freaking out. She loved me. I was sure of it. She'd be the first one digging through the snow to find me. Wouldn't she? Eventually, the snow around the car started shifting. A sign that someone, finally, was digging us out. Relief crashed over me. I grabbed Tatiana's hand, just for a second, before pulling away. We're getting out of this, I said. And we did. Light poured in as the snow was cleared, and the first face I saw was Steve's. He looked like he'd been through hell, his face pale, his hands trembling. Jeanette stood behind him, but something was off. Jeanette didn't rush to me, didn't throw her arms around me, didn't cry in relief. She just stood there, like she wasn't expecting me to come back, like she had already moved on. The second I stepped out of the car, Steve pulled Tatiana into his arms like he'd almost lost her forever. They held onto each other so tight I thought they might merge into one person. He was whispering something to her, checking her face, her hands, making sure she was okay. And Jeanette? She just stood there. I expected her to run to me, to grab my face, to cry, something. But she didn't move, just stared at me with this expression I couldn't place. Not relief, not shock, more like guilt. I shook off the thought. Maybe she was just in shock. Jeanette! My voice was hoarse. Aren't you gonna? That's when she finally moved. She walked up, put her arms around me in this half-hearted hug, and whispered, I thought you were gone. Not thank God you're safe. Not I was so scared. Just, I thought you were gone. Something in my gut twisted. But before I could say anything, Steve spoke up. We need to get inside. You guys must be freezing. He wasn't wrong. The cold had settled deep in my bones, and my head was pounding from lack of air. So I let it go. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe Jeanette was just in shock. That's what I told myself. But as we made our way back to the cabin, I noticed something else. Tatiana kept glancing at Jeanette. And every time she did, Jeanette refused to meet her eyes. Like they were hiding something. Back inside the cabin, Steve got the fireplace roaring while Tatiana made tea. I sat down on the couch, rubbing warmth back into my hands, but my mind was spinning. Jeanette sat across from me, staring at the floor. No hand on my knee. No, are you okay? She just looked uncomfortable. So, what happened? I asked, my voice still rough. Steve exhaled sharply. Man, it was chaos. The whole damn mountain shook. We tried calling you, but nothing. Jeanette was. He glanced at her, then cleared his throat. We thought we lost you guys. I looked at my wife. Yeah? You were worried. She flinched. It was small, but I caught it. Of course, she said a little too quickly. We called for help, but no one could get here right away. We started digging as soon as we could. I frowned. Something about the way she was talking felt off. Stiff. Scripted. Then Tatiana spoke. She didn't help. Silence. I turned to Tatiana. What? Jeanette shot her a sharp look, but Tatiana ignored it. She didn't dig, Tatiana said, her voice clipped. Steve and I did. She stayed inside. I stared at Jeanette. You stayed inside? She crossed her arms, defensive. There was nothing I could do. Tatiana let out a bitter laugh. Nothing you could do? We were out there with our bare hands, Jeanette. I was in shock, Jeanette stammered. Tatiana shook her head. No, you weren't in shock. You just didn't care. Jeanette's face turned red. That's not fair. Steve ran a hand down his face. Jesus, can we not do this right now? I barely heard him. My skin felt too tight, my head pounding. My wife didn't even try to help. She thought I was buried under a mountain of snow, and she just stayed inside? But before I could press her, something else hit me. Where were you? I asked Jeanette. She blinked. What? When it happened? Where were you? Her fingers twitched. I was in the cabin. Tatiana let out a harsh breath. No, you weren't. Another silence. Heavier this time. I looked between them. What the hell is going on? Tatiana stared at Jeanette, her jaw tight, her eyes burning with something close to disgust. Tell him, Tatiana said. Jeanette's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She finally met my eyes, but all I saw was guilt. And then, like a punch to the gut, I knew. She hadn't been alone in that cabin. The room felt like it had shrunk. The fire crackled in the background, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stared at Jeanette. She stared at me, and I saw it, the hesitation, the guilt, the way her fingers fidgeted like she was trying to come up with a lie. She wasn't alone in that cabin. Who? My voice came out rough. Jeanette shook her head quickly. It's not what you're thinking. I turned to Tatiana. Who was with her? Tatiana clenched her jaw. Her eyes flicked to Steve. That's when I saw his expression change too. He was looking at Jeanette like he already knew. Like they both knew. Everything inside me went cold. I stood up. Who the hell was with my wife? Silence. Then Jeanette whispered something. I barely heard her. What? I snapped. She squeezed her eyes shut. Matt. The name hit me like a slap. Matt, the guy who was supposed to join us later. The guy who wasn't here when we arrived. The guy Jeanette always acted too friendly with but brushed off as nothing. I took a step back like I needed actual physical space from this woman I called my wife. You're kidding. I laughed. A short, humorless thing. So while I was buried under a damn avalanche, you were what? Cozying up with another man? It wasn't like that. She rushed out. He got here earlier than planned, and we were talking, and then the avalanche happened and Tatiana scoffed. And you didn't want to be caught digging up your own husband while your side piece was in the house, huh? Jeanette turned on her. Shut up, Tatiana. Tatiana stood too, her eyes blazing. No, you don't get to play the victim here. I saw you, Jeanette. The way you panicked when we pulled him out. She turned to me. She wasn't scared for you. She was scared because of you. Because she knew you'd start asking questions. I turned back to Jeanette. Tell me the truth. Were you sleeping with him? Her hands balled into fists. Tell me the truth. She flinched, looked away, and that was my answer. Steve let out a heavy breath, rubbing a hand over his face. Tatiana just shook her head. And me? I stood there, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me twice in the same damn day. I don't know how long I stood there, waiting for her to say something, anything, to make this make sense. But she just kept staring at the floor like a kid caught stealing. Say it, I demanded. My voice was low, but I could feel the rage simmering beneath it. I want to hear you say it. Jeanette looked up at me, her eyes glossy. It wasn't like that. I let out a bitter laugh. Then tell me what it was like. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Tatiana folded her arms, shaking her head. You are unbelievable. Jeanette shot her a glare. Stay out of this, Tat. No, because I was the one out there, digging for your husband, while you sat inside pretending he was already dead. Tatiana snapped. I turned back to Jeanette. Answer the question. She swallowed hard, then finally whispered, We kissed. Felt like a punch to the ribs. My breath caught. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Steve muttered, Jesus Christ. Tatiana scoffed. Oh, now you want to admit it? I turned sharply. You knew. Tatiana's face was tight with anger. Not for sure, but I suspected. The way she acted, the way Matt looked at her, I had a feeling. And when she refused to help dig you out, that's when I knew. My head was spinning. Jeanette took a shaky breath. It didn't mean anything. Oh, don't. I cut her off. My voice was shaking. Don't insult me with that. I was scared, okay? She rushed out. We were drinking before it happened. I was upset, and Matt was there, and I held up a hand. Stop. She shut her mouth. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. She wanted to spin this, wanted to make it seem like it was just one mistake. But I wasn't stupid. You didn't just kiss him, I said, voice flat. Jeanette's eyes widened slightly. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. I know you, Jeanette. I know when you're lying. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. So let's try this again. How long has it been going on? Her breath hitched. She took a step back. And there it was. The truth she didn't want to say. Tatiana sighed, shaking her head. Just admit it, Jeanette. Steve sat down heavily on the couch, running a hand through his hair. Unbelievable. I felt like my chest was going to cave in. I had just survived an avalanche. And now I was standing here watching my wife try and figure out how many lies she could get away with before she got caught. And I wasn't going to let her. Jeanette's eyes darted around the room, like she was looking for an escape route. Like she thought if she stayed quiet long enough, I'd just drop it. I wasn't dropping anything. How long? I asked again, my voice sharp. She clenched her jaw. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. I snapped. Another pause. Too long. Too careful. She was thinking about what to say, trying to twist the story into something softer. Tatiana sighed loudly. Just say it, Jeanette. The damage is already done. Jeanette shot her a glare but finally muttered, "A couple of months." The words felt like a slap. Steve groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus." Tatiana scoffed. "Months? Wow. And you were really about to act like it was just a drunken mistake." I took a step toward Jeanette, my whole body tense. "You've been sleeping with him for months?" While looking me in the eye every day. She flinched. "It wasn't like that." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Then what was it like, Jeanette? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that." She crossed her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line, like she was angry now. At me. "Oh, come on," she snapped. "You think I just woke up one day and decided to do this? Do you even realize how lonely I've been?" I blinked. "Excuse me," she huffed, rolling her eyes. "You're always busy, always tired. When's the last time we had an actual conversation that wasn't about work or groceries?" Tatiana let out a bitter laugh. "Wow, there it is." Steve sighed. "Here we go." Jeanette whirled on them. "What? I'm just supposed to sit here and let you all paint me as some heartless cheater? Like I wasn't pushed into this." I took a slow breath, trying to control the sheer rage crawling under my skin. "So let me get this straight," I said coldly. "You felt neglected. So instead of talking to me, your husband, you decided to open your legs for Matt." She gasped. "That's not fair." "No, you know what's not fair? Me thinking we had a happy marriage while you were sneaking around behind my back." Jeanette's face twisted in anger. "You don't understand." I took another step forward. "Then help me understand. What part of this am I missing, Jeanette? The part where you lied to my face every day. The part where you sat inside with him while your own husband was buried in the snow." She looked away, her lips trembling. For a second, I thought maybe she'd actually show some real guilt. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I thought you weren't coming back." Silence. Tatiana's face went pale. Steve just muttered, "Oh my God." And me? I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You..." My throat was tight. "You thought I was dead?" She swallowed hard. Didn't answer. I let out a shaky breath. "And that didn't stop you, did it?" Her silence told me everything. I don't know what I expected her to say. Maybe an apology, maybe some pathetic excuse, something. But she just stood there, pressing her lips together like a child caught red-handed. I stared at her, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "So that's it, huh?" My voice came out hollow. "You thought I was dead, and your first instinct was to protect him." Jeanette's hands balled into fists. "It wasn't like that." Tatiana scoffed. "It was exactly like that." Steve muttered, "I can't believe this." I took a step back, running a hand down my face. "Wow. Just wow." Jeanette shook her head quickly, stepping toward me. I was in shock. "Okay? I wasn't thinking straight." I let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, you were thinking straight, all right? You thought, hey, maybe no one will find him. Maybe I can just move on with Matt and not have to deal with this messy little secret anymore." Her face turned red. "That's not what happened." Tatiana crossed her arms. "Then why didn't you help dig him out, Jeanette?" Jeanette whirled on her. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Nothing." She had nothing. "Yeah," Tatiana said bitterly. "That's what I thought." Steve let out a sharp breath. "For God's sake, Jeanette, just tell the truth." And then she snapped. "You want to know the truth?" Jeanette's voice rose, her eyes blazing with anger. "Fine. I didn't help because I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, things would just, I don't know, go away." Tatiana's jaw dropped. "Go away? Are you hearing yourself right now?" Jeanette whirled back to me. "I was scared, okay? I never wanted any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a hollow laugh. "Oh, really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you did everything you could to make sure I'd never find out." Jeanette's eyes darted around the room. She was trapped. She knew it. And then she did the one thing I should have seen coming. She lied again. "It was just once," she blurted out. "The night before the avalanche. That's it." I swear. Tatiana let out a sharp laugh. Oh, come on. Steve shook his head. Do you really think he's that stupid, Jeanette? Jeanette turned to me, desperation in her eyes. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I was drunk. I made a mistake. But Matt, he kept pushing. He kept. My stomach twisted. Oh, don't you dare. She hesitated. I took a slow, deep breath. Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim now. Her face crumpled. I'm not. I didn't mean for it to happen. Tatiana folded her arms. Yeah? Funny, because a second ago you said it was just once. Now you're acting like he pressured you. Which one is it, Jeanette? Jeanette's jaw clenched. Checkmate. Steve exhaled sharply, looking down at his hands. I can't believe this. I shook my head. I can. I turned back to Jeanette. Because I see it now. I see exactly who you are. Her breath hitched. Please don't say that. But I wasn't done. You didn't just cheat, Jeanette. You waited until you thought I was gone. And then, instead of falling apart, instead of trying to get me back, I let out a shaky breath. You protected him. Her face twisted. I was confused. No. I cut her off. You were relieved. Silence. Tatiana's lips parted slightly. Steve rubbed a hand over his face. And Jeanette? She didn't deny it. Jeanette just stood there, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something. Anything. But nothing came out. And honestly, there was nothing left to say. Because I had seen it. The way she flinched when I asked her if she thought I was dead. The way she hesitated when I asked her how long it had been going on. The way she tried, even now, to twist it into something else. She wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry I survived to find out. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing. My whole body felt too hot, too tight. So let me get this straight, I muttered. You've been screwing Matt for months, lying to my face, and when you thought I was dead, you just, what? Figured you'd get away with it. Jeanette shook her head wildly. No. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Tatiana scoffed. You knew exactly what to do. Nothing. Steve sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a damn mess. Jeanette turned to me, her eyes wide, pleading. I swear, I didn't want this to happen. I love you. I really do. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. No. No, you don't. She blinked rapidly. I do. No, Jeanette. I took a step forward, my voice dropping. You don't love me. You love that I loved you. You love the attention. You love knowing that no matter what, I'd always be there for you. But you were never there for me. Her mouth trembled. That's not true. Tatiana shook her head. It is true, and you know it. Steve muttered. For God's sake, Jeanette, just own it already. Jeanette whipped around to face them. Oh, shut up, Steve. You're acting like you've never done anything wrong in your life. Steve recoiled. What the hell does that mean? She scoffed, waving a hand. Like you're so perfect. Like you've never flirted with another woman or looked at someone else. Tatiana's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Jeanette's face froze. She had messed up. Steve sat up straighter, eyes flicking to his wife. Jeanette, what are you talking about? Tatiana turned to her husband, her voice low. Yeah, Steve. What is she talking about? Jeanette stammered. I didn't mean anything by it. Tatiana's lips curled. Oh, you were something else. You get caught cheating. And now you're trying to blow up someone else's marriage. Steve turned to me. Dude, you need to throw her out. Now. I exhaled slowly, nodding. Yeah, I do. Jeanette's head snapped back to me. Wait, no, please just. I held up a hand. Enough. I'm done, Jeanette. Her face crumpled. You don't mean that. I met her eyes, my voice firm. I do. She took a shaky breath. But we can fix this. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fix this? Are you out of your damn mind? You left me for dead. Her breath hitched. You made your choice, Jeanette, I said coldly. And now I'm making mine. And with that, I turned my back on her. Silence. Jeanette stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to form a thought. A real one, not another lie. Wait, she whispered. Please. I didn't turn around. Tatiana let out a sharp breath. Oh, now you want to beg? Steve stood up, rubbing a hand over his face. Dude, you want me to throw her out? I finally turned back, but not to Jeanette. I looked at Steve and nodded. Yeah. Jeanette gasped. What? I didn't answer. I just stared at her, waiting for the reality to set in. For the first time since this nightmare started, I saw real panic in her face. Tatiana crossed her arms. You heard him, Jeanette. Time to go. Jeanette shook her head quickly. No, wait, we need to talk. In private. Just us. I let out a slow breath. For what? She blinked. So we can work this out. I laughed. A bitter, humorless sound. Work this out? Jeanette, there's nothing to work out. You made your choice. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was scared. No, I cut her off. You were selfish. You didn't care what happened to me. You just cared about getting caught. Steve walked over to the door and pulled it open. The cold wind rushed in, cutting through the tense heat of the room. Time's up, Jeanette. She turned to him, her face twisting in frustration. You don't get to kick me out, Steve. Tatiana scoffed. Yeah? Well, he can. She jabbed a finger toward me. Jeanette turned back, her breathing shaky. Please, she whispered again. Just give me a chance to explain. I shook my head. No. Her shoulders sagged. I watched as the realization finally hit her. I wasn't falling for it. I wasn't going to argue or scream or beg her to stay. I was just done. Tatiana walked over, grabbed Jeanette's coat, and shoved it at her. Go. Jeanette clutched it to her chest, looking at me one last time. This isn't fair, she muttered. I stared at her, my voice flat. You're right. It's not. And then, without another word, she walked out into the cold. Steve slammed the door shut behind her. The room fell into silence. Tatiana let out a breath. Well, that was a disaster. Steve rubbed his face. Understatement. I just stood there, staring at the door. My hands were clenched so tight my nails were digging into my palms. Tatiana touched my shoulder. You okay? I swallowed hard. I don't know. And for the first time since the avalanche, I finally felt it. The weight of everything. My marriage was over. My wife had betrayed me. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure I knew her at all. The second Jeanette was gone, the weight in the room shifted. The tension cracked, but it didn't break. It just sat there, heavy and unmoving, pressing down on me. Tatiana and Steve exchanged glances. Neither of them knew what to say. Hell, I didn't even know what to say. I ran a hand through my hair, my fingers shaking slightly. I need a drink. Steve exhaled. Yeah, me too. Tatiana didn't say anything. She just walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of whiskey, and poured 3 glasses. No one spoke as we each took one. I threw mine back in one go, barely feeling the burn. Tatiana winced. Jesus, dude. I set the glass down. I don't even know what just happened. Steve rubbed his jaw. Your wife just exposed herself as a complete piece of garbage. That's what. Tatiana scoffed. Correction, your ex-wife. The words hit me like a punch. Ex-wife. That should have made me feel something. Anger. Sadness. Anything. But I just felt empty. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. I was ready to spend my life with her. Tatiana frowned. I know. Steve sighed, running a hand down his face. Man, I still can't believe it. Matt, of all people. I let out a slow breath. I should have seen it. Tatiana tilted her head. No, don't do that. I looked up. She gave me a sharp look. Don't sit here and act like this is your fault. It's not. I clenched my jaw. I should have known. I should have noticed something. Steve cut in. Dude, stop. You weren't the one sneaking around. You weren't the one lying. That was her. Tatiana nodded. Exactly. She made this mess. Not you. I let out a breath, my hands clenching into fists. She thought I was dead. My voice was quiet, but the words felt like fire on my tongue. And she still didn't care. Tatiana looked down. Steve shook his head. That part kills me, man. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. The cracks in my marriage had been there, sure. Every couple has rough patches. But this wasn't a rough patch. This was who she was. A liar, a coward, and a cheater. Tatiana spoke after a long silence. What are you gonna do now? I sighed. Divorce. Steve nodded. Good. Tatiana hesitated. And, Matt, something dark settled in my chest. I had been so focused on Jeanette, on her betrayal, that I hadn't even thought about him yet. But oh, I was about to. Matt. His name hadn't even fully settled in my head yet. I had been so caught up with Jeanette, her lies, her betrayal, that I'd barely thought about him. But now that the rage was no longer clouded by shock, oh, I was thinking about him plenty. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice even. Where is he? Tatiana and Steve exchanged glances. Steve sighed. He left after the avalanche. Didn't even stay the night. I frowned. Wait, what? Tatiana nodded. Yeah, right after we started digging you guys out, he grabbed his bag and said he had to go. Didn't say why. That didn't make sense. He had driven all the way up here for the trip, but he just left? Unless Tatiana must have seen the realization hit me because she nodded. Yeah, she probably told him to get out before you found out. Steve clenched his jaw. Coward. He knew what was coming. Of course he did. He knew I'd be coming for him. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. Where's he staying now? Tatiana bit her lip. Last I heard, back in the city. His apartment. Steve sighed. Man, I know you're mad, but don't do anything that'll get you in trouble. I let out a humorless laugh. Trouble? I met his eyes. Steve, he screwed my wife. Steve nodded. Yeah, and trust me, if you want me to drive down with you, so we can teach him a lesson, I'm all in. Tatiana groaned. Oh my God. You guys sound like you're about to roll up on him like a mafia hit. I didn't smile. Tat, I don't want to just talk to him. She sighed. I know. But listen, you can't let this guy get the best of you. He's not worth it. Maybe she was right. Maybe he wasn't. But that didn't mean I was just gonna let him walk away from this like nothing happened. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling him. Steve smirked. Good. Put him on speaker. Tatiana rolled her eyes but didn't stop me. The phone rang once, twice, then, click. A voice I used to call my friend answered. Hey man. I clenched my jaw. Oh, he had some nerve. Matt. My voice was sharp. A pause, then a sigh. Listen, man. I know you're upset. I laughed bitterly. Upset? No, Matt. Upset is when you spill coffee on your shirt before work. I'm way past upset. He exhaled. Look, I didn't want you to find out like this. I gritted my teeth. Oh? How exactly did you want me to find out? Were you planning to wait until I was dead for real? Silence. Tatiana muttered. Wow. He really has nothing to say to that, huh? Steve leaned in. Put him on FaceTime. Let's see what a guilty face looks like. Matt finally spoke again. I didn't plan for any of this, man. Right? I said flatly. It just happened. Right? He hesitated. No. I cut him off. You don't get to explain. You don't get to say anything. You made your choice, Matt. And I'm gonna make mine. Another pause. Then a quiet. What do you mean? I leaned forward, my voice cold. You'll find out. And then I hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the blank screen of my phone. The call had ended, but the tension in the room hadn't. It was still thick, hanging in the air, as if everything was about to explode. Tatiana and Steve were quiet, both of them watching me. They knew what I was planning, and I knew they knew. I don't care how it looks, I said quietly. He needs to pay for this. I need him to know it's not just going to be brushed under the rug. Tatiana let out a breath. I get it, but you need to be careful. You don't want to make yourself look like the crazy one here. I don't care how I look anymore. Tat. I snapped, then softened. I just can't let him walk away. Like this is all just some sick joke. Steve nodded. Yeah, I get that. But what's the plan? I sat back, rubbing my eyes. I'll drive down to his place tomorrow, face to face. I'm not giving him the chance to lie his way out of this one. Tatiana frowned. You're just gonna show up at his apartment? No warning. Yeah, I said flatly. He doesn't get a warning. Not after what he did. He can't hide behind his excuses anymore. There was a long pause. Then Steve spoke up again. You know, I don't like him. Never did. He's always been too slick for my taste. But what you're about to do, it's not gonna solve anything. You'll feel better for a minute, but then it'll just be over. You'll be left with nothing. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. He was right, in a way. Nothing would really change. I couldn't undo the betrayal. I couldn't erase the way Jeanette had looked at me when she finally admitted everything. But I needed something. I needed to feel like I had some control over this. I don't know what else to do, I admitted. I've been thinking about it for days. I can't let him get away with this. Tatiana sighed and sat beside me. I know, I get it. But you have to remember, revenge doesn't fix the hurt. It just feeds it. I stayed silent, staring down at my hands. They were still shaking. A small reminder of how everything had spiraled so quickly. I don't want to be angry anymore, I said softly. But I don't know how to let go of it. Steve clapped me on the back. You will, eventually. But don't do something you'll regret. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. Tomorrow I'll see him. And then maybe I'll finally feel like I can breathe again. Tatiana gave me a soft smile. The kind that didn't make everything feel better, but at least didn't make me feel like I was completely alone in this. Just be careful, she said quietly. I stood up, walking toward the window and looking out at the darkening sky. The silence that had settled in the room felt heavy, like everything was waiting for something. And maybe it was. Maybe I was. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over yet. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept playing through everything. Jeanette's lies, the avalanche, Matt running away like a coward. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there. Guilt on her face, but not remorse. By morning, I was ready. Tatiana tried to talk me out of it one last time. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't confront him, she said, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. But don't do something that'll land you in trouble. Steve, on the other hand, just patted my back. Whatever happens, happens. So I got in my car and drove. Matt's apartment was in the city, in one of those sleek, modern complexes with fake luxury. The kind of place guys like him moved into when they wanted to look more successful than they actually were. I parked outside and sat there for a second, gripping the wheel. My pulse was steady, but my hands were tense. This was it. I got out, walked straight up to his door, and knocked. Hard. It took a minute, but then I heard shuffling inside. The door cracked open and there he was. Matt. He looked exactly like the coward he was. Hair a mess, eyes wary, shoulders hunched like he expected this moment but hoped it would never come. Man, he sighed, rubbing his face. I was hoping you'd cool down before we talked. I laughed. Cool down? Matt, I'm not here to talk. I'm here to make sure you understand what you did. He stepped out into the hallway, shutting the door behind him like he didn't want his neighbors to hear. Listen, I know I messed up. I cut him off. Messed up. I took a step closer, watching him flinch. Matt, you didn't just mess up. You slept with my wife. You lied to my face. You tried to walk away like none of this mattered. His jaw tightened. I didn't plan for this to happen. I scoffed. Oh, that makes it better? He ran a hand through his hair. I never wanted to hurt you. I clenched my fists. But you did. He swallowed, looking down. I grabbed his shirt and shoved him against the door. Not hard enough to really hurt him. Just enough to make sure he understood one thing. I wasn't here to play nice. His eyes widened. Dude, look at me, I said, my voice low and steady. He did. You took everything from me. My marriage, my trust, my peace. And for what? Some cheap fling. He didn't answer. You thought I was dead, I continued. And you still didn't stop. His breathing was shallow now. He knew he had no excuse. I leaned in. You're lucky I'm not the kind of man who does worse. But I promise you this. If I ever see your face again, if you ever try to reach out to me, to Jeanette or to anyone I care about, I won't just be talking. Matt swallowed hard. I get it. I let go of his shirt and took a step back. He stayed pressed against the door like he was too scared to move. I exhaled slowly. Good. Then I turned around and walked away. I didn't look back. I stepped out of that building feeling lighter, not happy, not satisfied, just done. I didn't get some dramatic, movie-style apology from Matt. He didn't grovel or beg for forgiveness. And honestly, I didn't want him to. Nothing he said would have mattered. Because the truth was simple, he had made his choice. They both had. I got in my car, gripping the wheel for a moment. I thought I'd still be shaking, still feel that deep rage sitting in my chest. But I didn't. The anger wasn't gone. But it wasn't controlling me anymore. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt like I had control again. I drove straight back to Tatiana and Steve's cabin. When I walked in, Tatiana was already waiting, arms crossed, lips pressed together. So, Steve sat up from the couch. Did you hit him? I shook my head. No. Tatiana let out a relieved breath. Thank God. Steve just muttered. Shame. I sat down, rubbing my temples. I said what I needed to say. He knows I'm done with him. And Jeanette. I exhaled. I'm done with her too. Tatiana sat next to me. You really mean that? I nodded. Yeah. Because here's the thing. Jeanette wasn't worth my anger anymore. She wasn't worth my heartbreak, my pain, my time. She had already lost everything the moment she decided to betray me. And me? I was finally ready to move on. Tatiana gave me a small smile. So what now? I sighed, leaning back. Now? I heal. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it.